No one ever imagines work being an adventure, but sometimes that's just what you get. Hi, I'm Rebecca Wilson for Grab for the Grail, and I invite you to come along with me as we explore adventures in consulting. So, I had just landed my first role with the Department of Corrections. They were currently all on paper medical records, and I would be helping them to implement one of their very first electronic medical record systems. At the time, everything was still on paper, and there was this rush within the healthcare industry to modernize. I had interviewed for the role, and I was absolutely sure at this point in time that I had bombed it. I'm sure that many of you can identify with that feeling. But here comes Thursday, and I get a phone call congratulating me on getting the role. Now, I'll back up a second, though. See, I'm absolutely honest, I totally did not think that I got the job. I was positive that I had bombed it. And when I saw their number come up on caller ID, I actually sent it to voicemail because I really was not in the mood that day to get the denial. So they ended up calling a couple hours later, and I sent it to voicemail again. Well, the recruiter actually knew my dad, and she ended up calling him. So later on, my dad gave me a call, and of course I'm going to pick up the phone. And he informs me that he had actually accepted the job offer on my behalf. Thanks, Dad. So the thing was I was in Texas, and they told me I had to be in Idaho in 3 days for training. So you learn a whole lot about how little you can live on when you're trying to pack your entire life into the back of a 2003 Mitsubishi Lancer to drive across country. So I packed up my car, my Keurig coffee maker included, and I hit the road. The drive itself was rather uneventful. I did get to see some of probably the most gorgeous scenery ever. Utah was probably one of my favorite states to drive through, but entering Idaho was equally unique, as I had never truly seen valley farmland in that vibrant shade of green. My time in Idaho was very uneventful, just heading into the office daily, training. However, I did find the biggest bakery that I had ever seen in my life, and I will admit, I love a good bakery. And to this day, it still holds that title. It was called Pastry Perfection. And yes, I bought about $200 worth of pastries, which is totally great in theory, but terrible when you nearly crash your car from a sudden shock of sugar when trying to eat a cream horn over a mountain pass. No regrets, but I definitely wouldn't recommend it. So after I had arrived and I got set up in what would be my home base for the next 6 months, I get to go into work, and I am going to have to be fingerprinted. So this is my first experience being fingerprinted, and my first experience starting work like this. So this took me well outside of my comfort zone. And the place where they actually fingerprint you, for employees, it's the exact same place in which they fingerprint the inmates. So you kind of feel like you're going through general processing. I had massive amounts of anxiety. Not only was this my first job, but I really wanted to make sure that I did the best I possibly could. But being that it was for the Department of Corrections, it definitely elevated that anxiety, maybe just a bit. So after fingerprinting, you have to go through this next level background check. This is not your average background check. This is like FBI level, in-depth background check. They're going to dig into everything. So when they came back with the results, guy walks in, he's got his piece of paper, and he says, "Everyone passed except for you." And he pointed his finger straight at me, and my stomach just dropped. So my face completely went pale. I'm pretty sure I was telegraphing everything I was feeling. And then he laughed. Just kidding. But no, I seriously had a heart attack. Looking back at that moment, I think that was a lesson in and of itself. How often do we let our minds just spin and spin and spin with worst case scenarios? And there's no real reason why. But I can remember in that moment, my brain just spinning and spinning, thinking, oh my goodness, what in the world could they have found? What could possibly be in there? What in the world is he talking about? I think sometimes you just have to take a deep breath. But ever the one to find the silver linings in everything, at least now the FBI has my fingerprints, so if they ever find my dead body, they will know exactly who it is. So, despite this anxiety-inducing first moment, The next day was truly going to be a test of my mettle. My first time actually stepping into the prison. I had full access, total access, no escort, which was kind of empowering, but also incredibly terrifying as this was a new environment to me. So my job was to shadow the nurses and doctors, documenting their workflow processes. We spent the majority of the first part of the day just in the clinic, walking around, learning about what they do on a day-to-day basis. They show me the various systems they use, the tools, etc. However, in order to call the inmates to their appointments, there's this sheet posted. That lists all the appointments for the day so that the inmates know that they have an appointment. And in order for me to see where the sheet was, I had to actually go out into the facility with all of the inmates. So quick note on this. Prisons have different styles. This particular one was a dormitory style prison, meaning that there's no cells. The inmates just have bunks. Realistically, think camping, just with really tall walls, a whole lot of guards, and no kayaks. So I was definitely nervous about this too. Again, this was my first job and I was just a general ball of nerves no matter which direction because this was the beginning of my career. And who can't identify with being completely nervous, especially your first time? However, it's what we have to do to get the job done. So it's totally like, we're going to get out there, we're going to get this part of the workflow. However, this next moment I was really not prepared for. So as we exited the clinic, we headed out towards the dormitory, just walking down this long hallway. And then we turned a corner. And as I turned my head to the right, and the second I saw it, I snapped my head right back around and looked straight ahead. Oh, I could feel my cheeks. They just flushed red. To my right, those were the showers. Totally open showers. No curtains. Just inmates. Showering. There were quite a few of them in there showering at that moment. There's a whole lot of men with no clothes on. And I just remember chanting in my head, oh gosh, just focus, 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 focus. Trying to contain all the embarrassment that I felt at that moment in time. And for someone who's typically very modest, someone who doesn't even really like seeing men without shirts, this was way more than I bargained for on day one of work. I remember I called my dad later. We were just having one of our normal chats, talking about generally what happened during the day, and he asked me how my first day was, and I told him what I was doing, the activities that I had, what I was involved in. And they just said, so, sounds like you had fun. And I was like, yeah, but did you know that prison showers are completely open? He paused. That kind of said a lot right there. He said it in a very slow voice. No, actually didn't, pumpkin. I proceeded to explain to him how I'd acquired this particular piece of information, trying to belay that while embarrassed, I still managed to get the job done. In the years that followed, this has been one of my favorite stories to share with people. And I love to share this story to remind people that every day may throw an unexpected surprise at you and at work. You just have to learn to kind of laugh it off and keep moving forward. Because at the end of the day, it's about reaching the goal and remaining professional, even in the face of something you don't think you're going to see on your first day of work. Truthfully, stay unflappable. Thanks for listening. Until next time, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.